Europe is panicking right now, at this exact moment. Germany, the reluctant banker of Europe, has just agreed to back a staggering $210 billion loan package for Ukraine. A number so large, so politically explosive, that it sent shockwaves through Brussels. And in the same week, Europe quietly rejected former US President Donald Trump's proposed peace plan. A plan that, for a brief moment, threatened to reshape the entire future of the war. Watch until the end, subscribe, and remember this is not financial advice, because what comes next will change everything you thought you knew. Germany didn't want this. Berlin resisted for months, but the pressure kept building. Energy markets, trade flows, defense obligations. Europe realized something terrifying. Without Ukraine, Europe cannot survive the next decade. At least, that's the fear choking the halls of Brussels today. Here's why this time is different. For the first 2 years of the conflict, Europe acted like time was on its side. Slow decisions, endless meetings, delayed aid packages. Everyone assumed the US would shoulder the burden. But something shifted in late 2025. A political storm began forming across the Atlantic, and the EU saw its nightmare scenario getting closer, a future where Washington says, "We're done." Analysts misread the moment. They thought this loan was financial support. They thought it was a symbolic gesture. They thought Germany agreed because of diplomatic pressure. They're wrong. This is not generosity. This is survival. And here's where it gets worse. Europe's ammunition stockpiles are near empty. Military production timelines are lagging by 18-24 months. Ukraine's energy grid is collapsing faster than expected. And Russia's industrial output, despite sanctions, has been accelerating. Europe is running out of time. The $210 billion package isn't just money, it's political oxygen. It's the EU telling itself, we cannot collapse. Not now, not before the New World Order settles. But here's the truth beneath the surface. Europe didn't agree to this because it wanted to. Europe agreed because it had no choice. Now here's where the pattern becomes alarming. Let's break down the evidence. Europe's defense supply chain is stretched to the breaking point. Production of artillery shells is 40% below projected targets. NATO has admitted shortages in air defense missiles. Germany OS Rheinmetall factories are operating at maximum capacity, yet output still can put us to keep pace with battlefield consumption. And it's not just weapons. It's energy, it's fuel, it's industrial inputs, it's the backbone of the European economy. Ukraine needs electricity, it needs grid repair, it needs financial stabilization to keep its economy from spiraling. That's where the $210 billion becomes critical. It isn't only for military support. It covers budget stabilization, energy reconstruction, humanitarian provisions, debt rollover, and the hidden cost, absorbing Ukraine's collapsed tax revenue base until further notice. This number, $210 billion, is not chosen randomly. It reflects a long-term commitment, a commitment that Europe now feels forced to shoulder because the US political landscape has fractured. And then comes the second shock of the week. Trump's proposed peace plan, an aggressive, fast-track negotiation blueprint, is rejected in Brussels. Not debated, not softened, rejected. Why? Because Europe believes Trump's plan would freeze the war along Russian terms. Because Europe believes it would fracture NATO. Because Europe believes accepting the plan would mean acknowledging that Europe cannot defend itself. This is where the geopolitical strategy becomes crystal clear. Every nation is playing chess. Russia, the United States, Germany, France, Ukraine, and China, watching silently, patiently, positioning itself for the next phase. Europe's decision is not a coincidence. This is positioning, and it exposes the most uncomfortable truth of the decade. The transatlantic alliance is breaking. Let's zoom out. For over 70 years, Europe relied on the United States as its security provider. Washington paid the bill, Europe built welfare states, the US guaranteed safety, Europe built trade with Russia, the US offered deterrence. Europe invested in diplomacy. The US handled the hard power, but now the bill has come due, and Europe isn't ready to pay. That's why this moment matters, because the EU is suddenly forced to act like a superpower, and the price tag is staggering. Now let's compare this with history, because the pattern is too familiar to ignore. The first parallel, the Suez Crisis of 1956, dependency, weaponization, crisis, realignment. Britain and France depended on US support. They acted without it. Washington weaponized financial leverage. The crisis collapsed. And the realignment was immediate. Europe learned it could no longer act independently in global affairs. Today, the roles are reversed. Europe depends on the US. The US signals disengagement. Europe panics, and realignment begins. The second parallel, the Balkan Wars of the 1990s. Europe promised stability. Europe failed to deliver. America intervened. NATO was saved. But the message was clear. Without America, Europe cannot stop a war in its own backyard. Fast forward to 2025. History is repeating itself, but this time the US may not intervene. May not. The third parallel, the European debt crisis of 2010. Germany resisted bailout packages. Then Germany realized collapse was the greater danger. Germany paid, Europe survived, but Europe became dependent on German financial dominance. Today, the same dynamic emerges. Germany didn't want to fund Ukraine, but Germany fears a Russian victory far more, and this is where history becomes a warning. Every time Europe ignores structural weakness, every time Europe delays hard decisions, the crisis grows until Germany is forced to act. And every time, Germany resents it a little more. Now, bring this back to your daily life, because this isn't just geopolitics, this is your future. Europe's commitment to Ukraine and its rejection of a Trump's plan will affect prices across the world. Energy bills will remain high, defense budgets will rise, inflation will stick, taxes may increase, supply chains face permanent restructuring. Industries depending on stable Russian energy, chemicals, manufacturing, metal refining, will continue shrinking. If you live in Europe, prepare for a decade of higher costs. If you live in America, prepare for a shift in foreign policy priorities. If you live anywhere else, expect rising geopolitical fragmentation. And if this happens, the consequences could be immediate. Let's explore the next 18-24 months. Scenario 1, escalation. Peace efforts stall. Europe doubles down. The US retreats into election season division. Russia pushes harder. Ukraine struggles. Markets panic. Energy prices spike. Bond yields rise. And the EU fractures under financial strain. Scenario 2, strategic response. Europe finally invests in large-scale defense production. NATO rearms. Germany expands its industrial base. The $210 billion loan becomes the foundation for long-term Ukrainian integration. Costly, slow, but stabilizing. Scenario 3, global realignment. China steps in. Turkey brokers negotiations. India expands its diplomatic influence. The world shifts toward multipolarity. The US loses leverage. Europe becomes a secondary power bloc, and Ukraine becomes the centerpiece of a new global chessboard. Now, what should you watch over the next 90 days? Watch Germany's Bundestag debates, watch EU bond markets, watch electricity prices in Eastern Europe, watch NATO defense announcements, watch statements from Washington, especially during campaign season, watch Russia's winter offensive patterns, watch China's next diplomatic move. Each signal reveals the next chapter. Europe has made its choice. It will fund Ukraine, it will oppose Trump's peace plan, it will try to act as a superpower, whether it is ready or not, but the world doesn't wait, markets don't wait, war doesn't wait. And the truth is brutally simple. The next chapter won't be written in Brussels. It won't be written in Berlin. It won't be written in Kiev. It will be written wherever geopolitical power shifts next. And that shift has already begun. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next chapter is already unfolding.